welcome back. I am so excited to be back on the channel, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you so much. My name is Wendy. This is Devout. I'd like to just thank you so much for liking, sharing, and subscribing. And let's get right into the topic today. We are meeting with Dr. Ryan Lee. Ryan is an amazing support in the XJW, ex-cult, ex-religious world. When I first left the religion, he was the first one I called, and he had since been a mentor for me and got me kind of obsessed, like the psychology, personal growth junkie. And I am certain that if I've had a conversation with you behind the scenes, I have directed you to Ryan, and he's just been such an awesome resource to get us all through this crazy path that's called deconstruction. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Wendy. I used to be a Jehovah's Witness for over 30-something years, and one day I decided to tell my story on YouTube, and it turned into this amazing community of people who also want to share their story. In our stories, we find each other, and in each other, we find ourselves. And isn't that true? Dr. Lee, someone I consider a friend and someone who pulled me out of the trenches of leaving this destructive organization. Thank you so much for coming back on. It is an honor to have you.
It's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me back. Yeah, so I put some thought into what I thought people might find useful. And I separated that into two categories. One is I'd like to talk a little bit about the most common things that I see in the people that I work with, meaning what it looks like to leave an organization like this. What are some of the issues that you're going to encounter? And what I found mostly when I start working with people is they feel really alone and they feel a little crazy. You know, they feel like that there's something wrong with them. And they don't normally recognize that the things that they're experiencing are actually really predictable and almost universal. So I made a list of some things that I wanted to share with people that I imagine most people listening to this will resonate with, so that there's a basic understanding that you're not alone and this is not you. This is the product of the experience you've been through.
Thank you. So this is basically, for those of you who have never had a session with Dr. Lee, or maybe you're just waking up and you're just finding this video, one of the things I pride myself on with this channel is that you're not alone. Like all the stories on here, it's been very validating, but sometimes you need to have someone who not only has been there as you have, Dr. Lee, but also someone who understands the psychological component. So thank you so much. So essentially this is kind of like what a session would look like. Is that right?
Yeah, in a way. A lot of the things I'll be sharing right now are things that I end up sharing with the people I work with, particularly in the first session.
Right.
Again, just validating, getting a sense that there's an order to this chaos. You know, there's something there. You know, that's valid.
Mm-hmm. Well, it looks like one of the first bullet points that I found to be fascinating is reasons why people leave.
Right. Yeah. And I just found this interesting. There's a couple of things I noticed right off the bat as I started doing this work. I've been doing it 3 or 4 years now, almost exclusively with former Jehovah's Witnesses. And yeah, one of the things I noticed is that the reasons people leave, there's almost always some story about trauma, injustice, or toxic family. And when I say injustice, I'm referring more to how many times I've heard stories about two people that had consensual premarital sex, and the man gets a slap on the wrist and the woman gets disfellowshipped. I've heard a number of stories where the woman has been raped, and that exact same thing has happened. Wow. So, and I know for me personally, I didn't really start having doubts until my mother, who was married she had an abusive husband, and she was getting physically abused. And over and over again, the elders kept insisting that there was no grounds for a scriptural separation. So for me, that was my first, like, wait a minute, what's going on here? You know, I never see somebody that just comes and says, yeah, I just decided one day it wasn't for me.
Right.
Or the other one I don't hear is, oh, my family is so supportive and great and super functional, but this Jehovah's Witness thing really messed me up.
Right.
I never see that. Now, that may be confirmation, selection bias, rather,
Mhm.
meaning people who have those experiences maybe don't need to go see a therapist. But even in my personal experiences, I've seen that happen. There's a friend I'm thinking of when I was younger, whose parents were very permissive. Their parents got a lot of shit from the organization for being a little more liberal.
Mhm.
And two of their kids left the organization, did great in life. One of their kids stayed in the organization, and the family is still supportive and accepting that
Mhm.
they made different choices.
Mhm.
And they're very healthy, you know. It's just interesting to note that, you know, number one, if you're leaving, there's a really good chance there's a lot of other stuff there to unpack. Um, and that there's so many barriers to leaving that generally people don't leave unless the suffering or pain that they're experiencing reaches a point where it's worth risking all of the pain that comes with leaving and all the challenges. So yeah, if you don't mind, I'll just kind of continue down the list if that's all right.
Continue. I could easily chime in and what it's like to wake up and the fear that ensues. That I remember that feeling, especially as a woman. I'm about to lose everything. I'm about to lose everyone, all because I just don't believe it anymore. And
Yeah,
that is a really terrifying feeling to know that everything you've known you're about to lose. It's a terrifying feeling.
absolutely. It's huge, and we underestimate it.
Mhm.
Sometimes we take it for granted how
Mhm.
much those connections matter, even if it's not on a daily basis, but once a week, having those touch points with
Mhm.
other people. You know, and it makes me think I just read this quote from Charles Manson, who had said, you know, making people do what I want is the easiest thing in the world. All it takes is making them think we have something special and everyone else is deluded.
Wow.
If that doesn't work, make them think they're not doing enough. If that doesn't work, threaten to take their family away. Um, you know, and when I heard that, I'm like, that's eerily the whole, you know, that's the whole
Mhm.
structure
Mhm. Or
of the way
Voltaire,
business
where
works.
he said, people who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Wow.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot packed into there, but I'm particularly the part of if you threaten to take away family or community, it is one of the hardest things to go through.
Mhm. Uh, I think the ostracism, when we're talking about shunning and the disfellowshipping thing, when they take away your friends and family, that is an age-old war tactic. It's one of the most abusive but most effective ways to keep people in submission. Um, but most people, that is why they end up staying. That's why we have so many PMOs. For those of you who are new and you're just waking up and you're watching this, maybe buried under your covers like I was, and you're trying to not have any kind of a trace on your internet. A PMO is physically in and mentally out, meaning you're going to the meetings, you're kind of going through the motions, but mentally you know this is not for you anymore. And a lot of that comes from what you're talking about, Dr. Lee. It's a wake up process, and that is what we're going to continue to dive into.
But yeah, so number one of the most common things that I see when people visit me is that they have this feeling that they are broken,
Mm.
that there is something almost beyond repair. Obviously, the fact that they're there suggests there's hope that maybe not, but there's this deep feeling of just being kind of broken, very poor self-image, hard feeling good about yourself. And there's lots of things throughout the course of this conversation that I'll point to that relate to this.
Mhm.
But number one is, if you really want to break it down, we can start with core beliefs. Core beliefs meaning the things that we believe most essentially about the world, that influence everything about how we see ourselves in relation to the world and everything like that. And the core beliefs that gets infused to a Jehovah's Witness is that you are born sinful before you've done anything. I heard recently, I think it was Stephen Lett said some
Let
comment about babies being little enemies of God or something like
That's
that.
what made me might write letter of disassociation, by the way. I was already out, but that would made me said, because I have two babies, like my kids are
Yeah,
amazing. What? Yeah.
yeah,
So it
yeah,
was what?
yeah. And then related to that, I mean, so first of all, you have this fundamental idea that there's something wrong with you and there's nothing you can do other than be apologetic for your entire life and try to make up for it. But then you tackle that in with, you know, uh, constantly only praising performance. What are you doing in the organization? How many hours are you putting in? Are you being behaved at the meetings? Are you answering? Are you dressing this way? Are you acting this way? Are you thinking this way? And the message behind that is who you are naturally is of no value. So this is a very deep thing that your worth to other people around you that you've grown up with is only related to what you can do for this religion. So that doesn't foster a very strong sense of self, and that's something that needs to be developed, you know.
And now they just did away with the field service time.
I heard
And
about that.
it's wild to think that I grew up with like, and most who are watching this grew up with like your service time was indicative of your faith. It was indicative of your relationship with God. And so if you weren't getting X amount of hours, you don't get certain privileges, which we now know are chores and slave labor, but you didn't get to do a variety of things. Number one, you're limited to your options are limited to do anything. But this service time was Bible based up until a couple of weeks ago. And now all of a sudden, poof, eh, we're it's fine. And all those people whose self-worth was determined by this field service time, these goals that they can reach. What a slap in the face this has felt like for so many people. And now they don't really know what to do with themselves because, yes, it is a performance based religion or upbringing.
So much of their sense of self and identity is built up in how many hours they've put in and how many things they've sacrificed and how many job opportunities they've passed up because it would
Mm.
take away from the organization. So yeah, there's a lot of shifts happening, and I suspect that it is related to their recidivism rate, the decline in numbers. I think they are probably slowly shifting some things
Mhm.
that make it easier to stay.
Yeah,
Um,
and if you don't have to report the time, why are you going to even go out anymore? I
yeah,
mean, this is the way that they're going to, in my opinion, this is the way they're going to slow down the field service time or slow down field service in its entirety. Even though I thought the end of the world was what slowed down the field service, but what do I know? I'm just a thinking human being, you know,
yeah, it
silly
says a
me.
lot too. Like it to me, it suggests that I don't think they're getting so many people from doing service time. If there was gonna a huge influx of people as a result of hours put in service,
Mhm.
I don't think they would be so quick to let that one go. But you're right. I think it says probably it's not pulling that many people in. So yeah. So anyways, this poor self-image is number one. It's a big. It's almost everybody I work with struggles with this. And what I see over and over again is, roughly speaking, the only thing wrong with you is that you believe that there's something wrong with you.
Mhm.
Um, and and yes, sure, there's effects of trauma and things that you're going to struggle with because of the situation that you're in,
Mhm.
for sure. But
Mhm.
that's not evidence that there's something wrong with you. The fact that you've left, that you've had the courage to leave, is one of many examples of why there's something right with you. There's that voice in you that's saying, I need freedom. I want life. This is, I don't want to, I don't want to pass this life and pretend like this is all a test. I want to be part of it, you know?
Someone who's watching this right now and they're just like me, just really engaged on the verge of crying, saying, yes, that's exactly how I feel. But yet at the
Yeah.
same time, they're thinking, that's true. But how do I reframe it? What is one key takeaway? What is one step in addition to therapy and tons of self-reflection and help that you're going to give yourself to rebuild that self-worth? What is one thing one tangible thing they could do right now?
If I was going to start with step one, it is really understanding that everything that you've been involved with related to the witnesses is wrong. And what I mean by that is, and again, I'll talk about this later, but people leave sometimes and they're kind of on the fence of like, well, I don't know, maybe it's the truth, maybe it's not the truth.
Mhm.
And because of that, all of the things that sort of come along with that are still embedded,
Mhm.
so really starting from a place, and I'm not trying to push anything on anybody. And if if you believe it's the truth, by all means, please go back.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're uncertain, take some time, figure it out, and yes, start from a point of, this was traumatic, and everything I'm feeling about myself, this lays the groundwork for when those feelings come up and you start feeling poorly about yourself or treating yourself poorly.
Mm-hmm.
That's the start of being able to recognize, I'm thinking that because I was taught to think that. And that is the thing that is necessary to start taking steps of going, I'm gonna change the way I think about that. I'm going to select a different way of talking to myself. I could go on, but
I
it's
remember one of the key moments where you and I first started working together a couple of years ago, and I was looking for the difference between indoctrination and intuition. I couldn't tell the difference. And to be completely honest, for you viewers, sometimes I can't tell the difference between indoctrination, intuition, or anxiety. I'm still working on that. So if you're in the audience and still kind of figuring things out, you're not alone in that aspect either. Because grief is, Ryan will get into this, but grief is not linear. It's not an event. It's a process. So, but I remember that you told me to kind of challenge my thoughts. And can you just speak to that briefly, when it was like, if I had these thoughts, or if I was kind of not feeling secure in my own footing, it was most likely indoctrination or something like that. I don't know if you remember what I was talking
no,
about.
for sure. So one of the things is they've hijacked your sense of conscience.
Mm. Mm.
And they have told you, anytime you feel anxiety or uncertain about a thing, that's God speaking to you. And it is not God speaking to you. It is fear. It's fear of getting in trouble, for to put it shortly. It's fear of being rejected or being judged for not doing the right thing, and all the consequences as a witness that come with that. So here's the thing: is yes, part of the thing is, when you leave, you have to reclaim your sense of conscience, and it can be confusing. Is that my conscience, or is that something else? So as a rough metric, one of the things you can keep in mind is, take a second and figure out what you think about the thing. So for example, I'll take masturbation. That seems like a fairly easy one. If you in your head say, you know what, masturbation doesn't hurt anybody, it feels good. I can't really see any reason why that would be bad. And yet, when you engage in masturbation, you feel a tremendous sense of discomfort and maybe guilt.
Mm.
That's a good sign that you're dealing with programming.
Mm.
Um, what we're aiming for is something where our hearts and our heads match. Now, we're going to fall in different places with that, because we all have different feelings about different things in life. And there are going to be things that the witness has taught you that you're like, you know what, actually, I agree with that. And that's fine. But we were looking for things where the heart and the head is matching. If they don't match, there's a really good chance there's programming going on there. And then moving forward from that, the practice is, you know what, I don't see anything wrong with masturbating other than what I've been told by the witnesses.
Other than what I've been
So
told. So it's installed,
yeah,
right? It's like
yeah,
like a computer program. And when you need an
totally.
update, you have to kind of update your programming.
I
Uh,
like that.
what is the difference between guilt and shame?
I'm going to wing this one. I'm sure there are more precise answers to this, but when you speak it to me, here's what I hear. Guilt generally is about something you've done wrong, and generally in relation to somebody else because it has hurt somebody else.
Hmm.
I am not saying, oh, all guilt is bad. No, sometimes guilt's important. Sometimes you should feel bad because you did something that you shouldn't have done, and you knew you shouldn't have done it, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because when it motivates you to make changes and repair and fix whatever you did wrong, that's great. That's a useful thing. Shame generally is about this underlying feeling of worthlessness. And so anytime you make a mistake, you're seeing that as evidence of your core worthlessness. That you
So
just,
guilt is as I've done something bad or wrong, and shame is I am bad. I am wrong.
yes, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And they feel
And those,
synonymous in this religion.
mhm.
They feel like you can't really differentiate between the two.
Yeah, because the storyline with Jehovah's Witnesses is you are wrong, you are bad, and you should feel guilty. You know what I mean? It's like
Wow.
they're the same two sides of the same coin for them.
Wow. So if you're watching this and you're newly waking up and there's a measure of guilt, what I usually tell people is this is installed guilt. This
Mm.
isn't your, as you mentioned, I love that word metric. This isn't your internal metric system telling you you've done something wrong. It was installed. So everything that we've determined to be wrong or right, rather than healthy versus unhealthy, right? We want to get away from absolute terms eventually. It was all told to us, right? So someone who feels guilty for waking up, I can almost guarantee you, and you see more people than I do. So stop me if I'm wrong, where the guilt comes from what my family's going to think, what the congregation is going to think. And that's pretty much it. It's never what do I think and how do I feel about this? Or rarely, I should say.
It's not, and that's part of the task, which we'll talk a little bit about later, is that you need to you have a big task ahead of you to reassess what you think and how you feel about everything. You need to start going, how do I feel about that? How do I feel about this? What do I think about abortion? What do I think about premarital sex? What do I think about lying? What do I think about stealing? You know, you need to engage with all of these things when there's an infinite number of them,
Yeah, it's like
and
a
going,
whole
what do I actually think?
recalibration. Like you're literally born again. I hate to use that term, but you are literally, but here's the positive aspect, right? Like this is what we do on the channel. We talk about it is that there's no such thing as like supposed to be. Sure, there are laws and rules of societal norms that we typically fit into, but when you wake up, you have this opportunity to learn about the world and how it's actually very vivid and it has such bright colors and it's waiting for you. And now you get to decide, ooh, is this right for me? Is this healthy for me? Is this something I want to participate in? And it's a very foreign feeling.
It's a mishmash of exciting and
Yeah.
overwhelming
Yes,
because
it
it's a
is.
lot. And because there's no, for a lot of these things, there's no thing that we can point to and go, and this is how you know for 100% that you're right. Nope.
Mm.
You go by what feels right.
Hmm.
You do your best to sort through it.
Hmm.
You make decisions with the best of your ability, and then you hold space for the fact that as you grow, if you're growing, you'll evolve and those ideas will change. But if you're hung up on the idea of I got to find the right thing,
Hmm.
you're going to have problems because it doesn't exist.
The
It is only
challenge
right.
there, though, is when you are looking for the right thing, Ryan, it's like you are used to having someone, not you, not your guide, not your intuition, not your wisdom. You're used to having someone who is the foremost authority and can offer you the answers to life's most perplexing questions. And when you
Yeah,
have those things, that's what makes a cult. That's what makes a cult leader, is they offer those things that everyday people are actually searching for.
absolutely, absolutely. They alleviate the anxiety of what is this life and
Yes.
what is this thing and
Right.
what is time and what is
Right.
death. And that's scary. And hello, is there anybody out there?
Mm.
Oh, there's a God out there. Oh, this is all a test. Oh, we'll get rewarded in
Mhm.
the end. Oh, okay. Whew, I don't have to think about that. Well, now you got to think about it. You
Yes.
know.
Yes. And eliminating that whole, well, I used to be, well, I don't know what to think of me. What do you think of me? That was kind of how
Hmm.
I operated through life all the time.
Hmm.
Sometimes
I
it's
mean,
even in my 40s, it's still a challenge. Like, you know what? I don't know what to think of this, but I'm gonna get back to you on that. Make an
yeah.
appointment with my therapist. I don't know what to think about that. What do you think? What do you think? What do your psychology books think about that? Because I don't know what to think about that.
Yeah, and that's one of the core things that people have to work through is leaving witnesses because that's all you do as a witness. What does everybody else think? What does the watchtower say? What does the awake say? What does the governing body say? What do the elders say? How will it look? And even if it's not covered under one of those things, there's always this kind of, well, it's a conscience matter, which means we're
We
all
don't
going to
know.
judge you if you do it.
Right, right.
You know, so it's always external, what's the word I'm looking for? External motivation, extrinsic. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah.
Here's the thing though. Even if, and I can use me as an example, even if I did come up with an idea that I thought was, okay, this is it, this makes sense. I'm allowed to change my mind. Like, oh, maybe that wasn't the case. And when I leave, and if you're newly out, and people will say, this is very classic JW asking you as the new person who left, well, what do you believe now? Now what? What are you going to do? And I can just tell you what I tell people. I still tell people this. You know what? I don't know. I spent my whole life knowing everything, and I'm in charge, and I could teach you a few things, person who has lived 3 times my lifespan. Sure, I could teach you anything you need to know. And now it's like, you know what? I don't know. And I'm okay with that. I'm absolutely okay with that. Sometimes you just got to sit in the suck. Sit in the I don't know. Right?
Oh, that's huge. That's
Mm.
huge. Because that's most of it. If you're being honest with yourself, that's most of it. I don't know. Doing the parts I know, doing the parts I have figured out, winging it on the parts I haven't figured out. You
And
know.
I remember when you're in the organization, there was this article, and it said, is being a good person just enough? And that's kind of ingrained in our heads. And so now when you talk to people who have left and they're gaining experience, and you think, you know what? If you love other people and you take care of yourself and you're a contributing member of society, maybe for today, if all you did was breathe and you're doing those things, maybe that's enough. Really hard to
Yeah.
wrap your mind around.
Sometimes getting out of bed is enough, but yes, if you want some starter packs, go with be kind. Do something that makes somebody's day better, even a tiny bit. I think you start there, you're going to be well on your way to addressing a lot of these things.
I love that so much. It starts with being kind to yourself. I think we also need to get into self-compassion, which is something that is a huge challenge, because martyrdom is a really big deal in that organization. I can't rest. I can't,
Yeah,
I can't have a Sunday off. That is one of the biggest things that's a real challenge for the newly awakening XJW, is like, wait, you mean I don't have to get up early on a Sunday, and I don't have to go out and pound pavement for people who really don't want to see me? See, I derailed you. So we
yeah,
go
no,
on
that's
these
fine.
tangents.
So I can re-rail us if that's all right with you.
Yes, please do.
So yeah, let me go through a few other things. And so okay, social anxiety is
Mhm.
almost a given for just about everyone I work with. Call it anxiety, awkwardness, whatever you want, whatever label you want to put to it. And again, I'm just going to start by just explaining like why. And one of the biggest reasons is, again, Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't really relate in an authentic way. Um, for the most part, sure, I'm not trying to take away. I'm sure you've had some beautiful connections with people there and moments where you share things, but for the most part, on the whole, we act the way we're expected to act. We express opinions that have been approved by the group. We know there's certain things you don't say and there's certain things you don't talk about. And with the things you do talk about, there's specific ways you're supposed to talk about them that's accepted, which is all to say it's fake. It's not real. We haven't really had a whole lot of opportunity, most of us anyways, to like, comes to our mind and not fear that if we say something wrong that there's going to be huge repercussions, and so not only has that not prepared us, but it's also hard because in another way of putting that is our conversations are a little scripted as a witness. We sort of know, oh well, they say this and I know how to say that. And then it's nice that everyone gets included in that organization. You're supposed to invite everyone to the party. It's okay, to an extent.
Right.
But yes, we haven't gone through the trials that a lot of children go through of like, not everyone likes you.
Nope. You're not
And
going to get picked for the team. Nope.
yeah, and
Right.
and and,
Right.
and having the experience that that's okay. That's part
Mhm.
of it.
Mhm.
Most people you meet, you won't like in terms of like, I want to be best friends with them.
Mhm.
Most people will fall into like, yeah, they're fine. I don't know if I want to see them again or not, but it's fine. But
Mhm.
the people that you're really going to connect with, it's a very small thing. So anyways, there's all these things kind of working against you in this when you're trying to be social and trying to connect with people in the world. And again, there's all these anxieties and the self-worth things that get in the way. And because you feel uncertain of yourself, you may act a little weird, and that may act, cause people to pull away a little bit, and then they pull away, and you see that as a sign that you're not very good, and that's,
Right.
and it's just this cycle. And the truth of it is, it's one of those things you got to go out there, you got to make as many connections as possible because most of them will not be your people.
Mhm.
Um, and you have to practice again that self-love of saying, well, that person wasn't for me. They didn't seem interested in me, and that's fine. They saved me some time.
And that's not
Really,
about me. It's just life. It's not, I wasn't, for, you're forever trying to make yourself palatable. And
yeah,
you kind of disown yourself. You kind of self abandon in a way to make yourself more palatable for the person. And what I've discovered, it was all in an effort to be chosen. Maybe if I act this way, this person will choose me as a friend, or this
yes,
person will choose me as a potential, romantic partner, or maybe I'll get chosen for this job if I just act a certain way. And
yeah,
there's this internal struggle of who am I though? I don't know. But you know what? They like me, so that must be a good thing.
yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. No, of course. And this is partially human, but it's way amped up for witnesses. And another way to say that is, if I am worthy enough, will they love me? Will they give me the love that I need? It's just love. It's just wanting love and trying so hard to get it and not recognizing that that trying is actually not getting any closer.
Well, because in that organization, love is conditional, and love
Totally.
in its purest form is not conditional.
Yeah.
Even other Christians and other denominations, they talk about love in its literal form. It's not something you should have to earn.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. But that's something we need to learn for ourselves. And it's hard. We have to reparent ourselves.
Reparenting, yeah. It seems that the words that are synonymous are love and acceptance. And, just because you're not accepted means you're not worthy of love. There's so many words at the organization. We could talk forever about loaded language, but the feelings that come up, it's this fear of I'm just I'm just not enough. I just don't measure up. And that is
Yeah.
where the social anxiety comes in. I'm a little awkward. And what I what I typically tell people is, listen, everybody has their weird. Mine just happens to be I was in a cult, and that's my
Mhm.
weird. So if I'm a
Yeah.
little weird, that's why. I tend
Yeah.
to own it now. I used to be when I first left. Hi, I'm Wendy. I'm an XJW. It was my identity.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that, it's okay. You'll stop eventually. I promise.
I'll go so far to say, like, do it as long as you want. That's
Yeah, yeah.
great. Like that's fine. People get really wound up about that. Like, oh, I don't want people to know.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating thing about you. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? And most people you meet, here's what'll happen most of the time. The vast majority of the time. One, they will be interested. What is that like? Tell me more about that. Number two, which is not infrequent, they'll go, "Oh, you've never had a birthday party before? Let's have a birthday party. You've never had a you've never gone out drinking before? Let's go out drinking." Whatever it is, you know what I mean? There's that kind of like, "Oh, now that I know this, how fun is it to kind of join you on this adventure of doing new things?"
I love that. Join me on this adventure. It's like my new party trick. I'll tell you what, I'll tell you a million things I've never done before. And socially awkward is definitely one of them.
Yeah, it's a great.
I inject self-deprecating humor into it. That's why I'm in counseling. For those of you who do it, that's what I do. Hi, I'm
Yeah,
Wendy. I'm a little weird.
yeah. That's beautiful, and it's a great way to start. And also, when you show up and that's how it is, it also will like shave off some of the edges when things go a little bumpy. When people are talking about that rated R movie that everybody's seen but you or whatever, they'll understand like, oh, you haven't seen that. Oh, we should watch that. You know what I mean, or whatever. But
Yeah.
it takes some of the constriction out of it, and just kind of like
Hmm.
to put it out there like this. Yeah, there's some things I haven't experienced because of this thing that I've gone through.
And I will say that even in the years after leaving, sometimes it still comes up. I'm not going to say that everyone or, it's not a crutch. Like, well, let me behave this certain way because I was in a cult my whole life, or let me claim ignorance. You can only really say I don't know one or two times. But for the most part, it's going to come up often in situations that you don't even really expect or realize. I remember my first job interview, and then recently I was at a conference at work, and I had to get on a stage in front of all these educated people, and my boss was like, "No, this is all you," and I'm a woman on stage like teaching other people, and I was like, "What is going on here?" All these years
Yeah.
later, and I felt a little, you know what? I would much rather sit in the back of the room. And then he asked the women to carry the microphones around the room, and they're like, "Sure, whatever. What can I do to help?" And I'm like, "Women are carrying the microphones? What is happening here?" Like, I didn't know what
What
to make of
world is
that.
this?
Yeah, exactly. So even deconstructing, it still comes up, these thoughts and these social norms that were not so normal at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to get off a tangent, but that microphone thing is such a weird thing. 'Cause I
It's
remember,
so
you
wild.
know what it is? Because meetings are so goddamn boring
Yeah.
that I remember as a kid, I was like, oh, I can hold a microphone, I can do something. But then also, like, it's weird that that's such an exciting thing to do, but also weird to go, but only for the men. Only the men get this privilege. Sorry, women. You know what I mean? Like, what is that? It's such a weird
It's just
thing.
carrying a microphone. It's just, I don't understand. Yeah,
Yeah.
one of those many things that are very, very strange.
Yeah.
And when I tell, and listen, and maybe you can also speak to this when you do tell people what it is that you went through, or the things that you're not familiar with, or the things that were normal to you. There's going to be a reaction from the general public or the people that you're speaking with. They're going to be a little shell shocked. They're going to be like, "What? Really?" Like, I still get that. That's like, if the whole microphone thing, I had to explain to my coworkers, like, that's wow. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's a little crazy. I know. But hey, you know what? Here
You
I
will get
am.
that reaction, but I do think it's just important to highlight, like, people fear that reaction, so they don't
Mm,
share.
right.
And they fear that reaction because what they hear is, here's what it actually is. Oh, that's kind of weird. Tell
Mm,
me more about that. That's generally the energy behind it. But
mm,
what they fear and what they often interpret is, oh, you're weird. You come
mm,
from something weird. That's a weird story. You know what I mean? Like this, like they imagine that there's this judgment. So again, they sort of avoid anything that may possibly make someone think they're more weird than they already feel.
mm.
Um, but 98% of the time, it's not that. It's just it is weird.
It
and
is.
it's a normal reaction. You're like, that's pretty weird,
That's
you know?
that's pretty weird. Or you think
Not
about
judging
the way
you,
another,
but
or you think about the way another family grew up. They think if outside of the religion, if another family grew up differently than you do and they have a different way of doing things, it's like, all right, well, it's a little unconventional, but like I said, everyone has their weird, I guess.
everyone's weird. And that's
Everyone's weird.
I'll just add on that one last note is that's the other thing. When you share your weirdness, people feel comfortable sharing their weirdness. And then you bond over it and you're like, oh, good. I don't know. You're anxious at the party too? Me too. Oh, I'm glad someone else said it.
Oh,
You
I
know,
love that. If
the
you share
opportunity just to
your
bond.
weird, they'll share their weird. Oh,
Totally.
I
Yeah.
love that. Then I don't feel
Puts
so
people at
bad
ease.
for like my weird enters the room before I do. I don't feel so bad about that now. One of the things that this is a topic for me. Um, we didn't get there yet, but I do like this quote that you said, "We're in the world, there is no script." What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, so we can apply that to what we were just talking about in terms of social interactions. There's no script. We just kind of people just talk and see where it goes. When it's working well, we generally have this attitude of the conversation takes itself somewhere.
Mm,
You know, there's not an idea of like what's okay to say and what's not okay to say, more or less. I mean, we got some politically correct type boundaries,
yeah.
but no, it's sort of there's no script, but I can extend that to just in general. Again, like we were talking about earlier, the Bible is a script in a way. The Bible is a script of like this is how you're supposed to think about things and live your life. But that just doesn't exist. There's no script for how you're supposed to live a life. Some
Wow.
people make a lot of money. Some people decide not to make a lot of money and do something that just makes them happy. Some people want to get married. Some people don't. Some people want a kid. Some people don't. I mean, I'm just scratching the surface. There's just an infinite number of
Mhm.
choose your own adventure. There's no script, you know?
Yeah, and speaking of the Bible, and when I first left, it was separating the organization for me at first, separating the organization from the Bible and separating those two things from what I actually believed. It was this method of extraction. So I would say, you know what? I didn't leave Jehovah. I didn't leave God. I left an organization falsely claiming to represent him. Because at the
Yeah,
time, I still believed in God or Jehovah. I still believed in the Bible, but I was very offended that the governing body suddenly was taking over as Jesus as the foremost authority. Like it really was bothering me. And then eventually the deconstruction process went a little further there because at the time, yes, the Bible was the actual script of life. By extension, though, as an avid reader, the Bible to me is no different than, I don't know, Grapes of Wrath or The Great Gatsby. Like there's
yeah,
little nuggets in all kinds of amazing literature that you can not
totally.
literally live by, but maybe apply.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I know if you see it that way, then it becomes lighter, and it's about
Mm,
what ideas do I like in here? Oh, I don't like that
mm,
idea. Well, I like that idea. For me, mostly, and I hope not to offend anybody, but I don't need most of the Bible, but I like Jesus. Jesus had some good things to say, some good
yeah,
ideas about how to treat people and how to
yeah.
be and accepting everybody. I really like those parts.
Which by today's standards, I'm just going to say this to you audience members, and you may find this offensive. By today's standards, Jesus would be an apostate. He
Yeah,
left the
yeah,
he left the religion of his family. He spoke
yeah,
badly about the Jewish religion. In fact, he made other people leave and converted them to Christianity.
absolutely.
So I'm
Yeah,
okay with that as a
yeah,
well-known apostate. But they created me too. I got good at public speaking. And Ryan,
yeah.
one of the things before we dive into the next topic that I'm very passionate about, one of the greatest things that you've told me for the newly waking up person is nothing is all good or all bad. I
Mm.
still use that every day in everyday life. Can you briefly talk about what you meant by that as it pertains to waking up and how you're framing this newly waking up individual and their mindset?
Yeah, yeah, totally. So part of the challenge of leaving, one of the tasks that's required is to get away from black and white thinking, right and wrong thinking. That's again, Jehovah's Witnesses, everything falls into a category of right and wrong.
Mm,
And there's this kind of mentality, and people struggle with this a lot, even when they leave the witnesses, is like they will interact with somebody who they seem to kind of like, but then that person expresses an unsavory opinion or maybe does something that's a little morally not so, and they immediately go, oh no, you know what I mean? Like, in other words, that's a bad person.
right, right.
And the truth is, this black and white people talk about living the gray. I don't like that metaphor. I like living in color.
Living
You
in
know what I mean? Like there is
yes.
so many colors, including black and white.
Mhm.
Gray just sounds depressing, like you're just sort of
Yeah, like
compromising.
brown.
And
Like
no, it's just there's so much out there. So again, recognizing people come in colors.
mm,
And maybe yellow isn't your color, and that's fine, but that doesn't mean yellow's bad. You know what I mean? And again, to extend just a little bit further, yes, we are all good and we are all bad, depending on the circumstance and what's at
mm,
stake and a number of other factors, who we are with. We are all capable of doing things that are not aligned with our highest self.
mm,
We everybody will let us down in some
mhm.
way, and we will let everyone down in some way.
Wow.
That's where grace, forgiveness, compassion comes in. We are imperfect. We are a mishmash of all good and not so good things.
Mhm,
And we can't separate those things. We can't
mm.
just only stick to the things that are only pure good because it doesn't exist and we will just end up walling ourselves in.
And the brain doesn't really know the difference between reality and fantasy. The brain is from what anything I've been reading recently, it's like the brain can't really determine the difference. We create that difference. One
Yeah.
of the things that I found fascinating in your nothing is good or is all bad is that you take like so I look at the religion like it was a really toxic relationship and a narcissistic relationship, which again, you're an expert in narcissism. And there were, if you look back on a relationship that you were in, there were good things about that particular relationship with that particular person that I'm going to take with me. And maybe I'll bring those good things with me into the next phase of my life. And that's kind of how I look at the religion now. Like, yeah, nothing is all good or all bad. It's a terrible religion, but the good from me that came and the good from you as a viewer, what are the good things about you that came from this religion? Are you a good speaker? Are you driven? Do you have this beautiful understanding of children and the elderly people or people who are in a foreign language? Like, what is your thing that that religion taught you that you can carry with you forever? That's where I learned the nothing is all good or all bad type of mentality. What can you pull from it?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I'm sorry. What's the question? What can you pull from that idea?
Yeah, it was just a point. It wasn't a
Oh,
question.
I'm
It was,
sorry. Is that
yeah.
rhetorical? Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
Got it.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the topic that I talk about a lot, and I'm glad you're getting into it because I do think it's a very important emotion, but I don't think we should sit there. I think we should feel it and then move on. And I can't wait for you to dive into this. Ryan, please talk to us about anger.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah. Yeah, it is important. And it is when I get somebody that doesn't own having any anger, I am very suspicious
Hmm.
because you have good reason to be angry. Now, here's what usually comes up is what I hear a lot is I don't want to be somebody who's just angry for the rest of my life. Or, and I don't want to single anybody out, but yes, occasionally there's some people in the community that have just sort of built a whole identity out of their rage,
Right, right,
and it's just bile, and
right.
it's bile with zero compassion or softness
Mm-hmm.
to it. And yes, some people, but not most people, end up in that place, and that's their own journey. But
Hmm.
for most people, yeah, they carry this anger. They should. You've been in a cult,
Mm-hmm.
and you missed out on birthdays and holidays and dances and first kisses and dating and college and developing a career and pursuing your interests and Saturday mornings. Like, you know what I mean? I could go on and on for something that isn't real, and then you lost your family at the end often.
Anger.
You know what I mean? So yes, like it's valid
Mm-hmm.
to be angry. And so people, again, they're one, afraid of being too angry, but also often what's even more behind that is this Jehovah's Witness programming that, like, oh, anger's
You're
that's
not
not an
allowed to be
acceptable.
angry. You got to
No.
push that shit down and get
Mm-hmm.
over it because you have the new system coming and you're not allowed to feel anything that could potentially be termed negative. That's the thing is people relate anger to a negative emotion or negative thing and it's not anger overturns laws,
Yeah,
right? Like
absolutely.
right? So it's not a good feeling, but it's not necessarily a negative feeling. Can you speak to that as well? How we relate anger to negativity?
Yeah, because it is unpleasant.
Unpleasant.
And
Hmm.
when it is unchecked, can lead to problems.
Hmm.
So anger that is unleashed without self-reflection on those around you, that's a problem. Anger that is not released at all and just turned inward and suppressed is also a problem just as much.
Hmm.
Um, it really it is an expression of your authentic self in the face of, let's say, injustice, for an easy way of putting it.
Wow.
Something happened that shouldn't have happened, that was wrong, that you ended up bearing the brunt of for some, in lots of different ways. So the task, and it's hard, um, but the task is to one, conceptualize this not as this monster and that you're an angry person and this is no, it feels like a monster because you have a backlog,
Mhm. Mm.
but it's a backlog of reasonable, taking issue with in a reasonable way with a million different things. So it starts by having compassion, and when you feel that anger, start by going, yeah, I have a good reason to feel that way. Um, Now, what to do with it? There's lots of different things. We can just go off the easy ones, therapy, talk it out, yell at your therapist. I always tell people, lay it on me, say the worst thing, write it out. write it out and say it in the most hateful way if you're feeling hateful.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the word hate, but you know what I mean? Like
Sure.
anger to the extent of like, if it is feeling full of bile, put it on paper, right? Remember, this is a side note. Remember, your thoughts are not sins. It is
Mm.
okay to have thoughts and to say, I want to murder this person. I'm being polite. You could say a lot worse than that.
Yeah.
But you,
Yeah.
it is fine to say that in
Mm-hmm.
honor and say, yes, I feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to do it? No,
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to do that for a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fair that I feel that way.
The thought
Um,
police, that was terrifying for me, Ryan. You helped me to appreciate what intrusive thoughts are because you're very damning about these thoughts that run through our head when really thoughts can foster emotions. You're the
mhm,
expert on this, but I learned, if you look at thoughts just objectively, like you would passing traffic. Like I'm not attached to the cars that are here in passing traffic, but I see them, I recognize them, and I'm like, all right, traffic, we're going to move forward anyway, but in my past it was very much, why am I thinking this? Oh my god, am I crazy? Am I this? Am I that? Just all the and thoughts turned into thoughts, and it was a spiral. I remember
yeah,
spiraling right in front of you. And so I love that you said that your thoughts are not sins. And that's a
no,
terrifying thing that you have to unravel as an XJW.
yeah, we all have lots of weird and awful sometimes thoughts, and and that's just how it is. Our mind is like a chattery monkey. You know what I mean? It's just nonstop, and yeah, we get into problems again. The two ends of that spectrum is we get into problems of like, oh, I can't think about this. Don't think about a pink elephant. Don't think about a pink elephant. You make yourself crazy that way. Or if you get too attached to either of those thoughts too, I thought this thing. What does that say about me? What
Yes.
kind of person would think that?
Yes.
No, you're just a person. It's just we would have problems in the world if we all could actually see inside each other's head, because we all think lots of things. What's important is which ones you feed,
Wow.
which thoughts you feed and develop and nurture.
And I'm going to throw a scripture into this that I know a lot of the audience are thinking about right now. There's that scripture that says, and it's something simple. It says, if to have thoughts about a woman is to commit adultery in the heart, where it's like just even thinking another person is attractive while you're married means you might as well just go and do the damn thing. That is an example of thought police. That is an example of thought control. They use the Bible as a weapon to control your thoughts. And that's just not, I want you to, if you could briefly speak to the psychology of it. Is that even something that's possible?
So I would say yes, but not in the way that Jehovah's Witnesses say it. Jehovah's
Perfect.
Witnesses are very attached. Control your thoughts so you will not have thoughts that X, Y, Z.
Mm,
Meditation is a beautiful way of mastering and strengthening the ability to steer your thoughts, to or really steer your attention is really what we're talking about. Thoughts are just, like you said, cars and traffic, just constantly kind of
noise.
coming and going.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can totally develop the ability to say, oh, I'm noticing that thought coming up, but I'm directing my attention towards this thing. And to develop grace when even that thought continues, but to not get freaked out by it. Well, that thought's there. I'm having a thought that I'm not feeling good about myself today. And it's kind of, for whatever reason, it's running all day. All right, that's fine. It's there. I don't have to feed it. I don't have to panic. I just acknowledge that it's there and I redirect.
So I'm having
Um,
a thought that I'm going to be killed at Armageddon
hmm,
because I don't believe in what Jehovah's Witnesses think anymore. What do I do?
hmm,
My kids are going to be killed. This is what was told to me. I know what you helped me do, and I know where I am today, but to the average watcher, the average viewer, I'm having
yeah,
thoughts that I'm going to die, and my kids are going to die because of me.
yeah. I mean, there's a few ways I'd play with that. One is, if you say I don't believe witnesses anymore, but I'm afraid I'm going to die in Armageddon, then some part of you still believes.
So
So
challenge the thought first.
challenge it, explore it for sure. And then I would really want to push on some awareness that really what we're afraid of is dying, which is going to happen. So sometimes the fear is coming up because of an actual thing that you are afraid of that's lying there. You know, it may manifest as, oh, Armageddon, we can call it that. But to step back, it's really what we all fear is death, you know, um and then I would probably try to shave some edges off by pointing out, well, you have options. You can go back to the witnesses if you want. And everyone immediately goes, no, I'm not doing that.
Right.
And I said, and number two, here's the consolation prize. There's no hell, according to the witnesses.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
we may have a worst case scenario, which is very unlikely. We have some scary moments coming towards the end of our life, and then it'll be done.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
it. That's why, Wendy, you're going to die and your kids are going to die, but then I'll be dead
yeah, yeah.
and I won't know it. So,
You will know it, and it'll be over. And
okay.
that I won't go there, but that opens up a whole other question of like, yeah, finding ways to explore what might that be?
Yeah. Like, I don't know. Is there another life? Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I've worked with ayahuasca for quite a bit, and I have personally seen things that for me put that question to rest, but everyone else has their own journey.
And for those of you who are new to this, Ryan had spoken to me about this for years. I've still been unable to try it. Can you just briefly describe what that is, what you just talked about? Because there are a lot of people who don't know.
Sure. Ayahuasca and other psychedelics, and I'm going to start by saying it's not for everybody.
Mhm.
Um, there are many different paths to growth and healing, but psychedelics and ayahuasca is one I work with is a psychedelic medicine in South America that's used for a lot of different things, but is particularly effective for working through trauma, depression, anxiety. And I don't want to say too much. I think it's one of those things that if your curiosity is piqued, feel free to reach out to me or just do your own online research.
Okay.
But it has the capacity to provide an experience where the veil of reality is sort of pulled back. And what you may see on the other side of that veil is very unique to each person, but generally there's an overall more expansive understanding in relationship to life.
I appreciate that. One of the other things you helped me really place value on is you already mentioned it briefly, is you mentioned meditation, but one of the things that you discussed with me and literally taught me how to do, and I have to admit, sometimes I still forget how, is that you taught me to literally feel love. And for someone who is struggling with that right now, can you just briefly describe, because I know what that did for me as a newly waking up person. Can you briefly just discuss that as what
Sure.
exactly that means? Meditation from a JW perspective is taboo. Like meditation means digesting what you've read. Like that's what meditation is in the JW world. So
No,
first, what
yeah.
exactly do you mean by meditation in the real sense and not the indoctrinated sense? And secondly, an example of feeling that love.
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you the quick version. You know, meditation generally involves some kind of object of focus. Object doesn't have to be in like a physical object, but
Mhm.
meaning a subject. Could be a candle, could be your breath, could be whatever's happening in your body, but it is a chosen sort of focus. And the relative game, if you want to call that, is to maintain your focus, and your mind will inevitably go in all sorts of places and throw all sorts of things at you. And one of the most common things you hear when people start meditation, they're like, "Oh, it's not for me. I'm not good at it.
Mhm.
I sit down and my mind immediately wanders." And what they should know is that's everybody.
Mhm.
Um, there's this idea of like, "Oh, I'll just sit down and then I will feel."
Mhm.
Ah. It's
Mhm.
not that.
Mhm.
Your mind is always going. The task is to calmly keep redirecting, you know. And again, when you start off, 5 minutes a day is fine. Just stick with it, keep following through. But 5 minutes or 1 minute, if that's too much for you, but follow through. But it's this task. And so if I was sitting down meditating, like, this is what it would look like. Okay, I'm choosing my breath. I am breathing in, and what was that thing that I was supposed to do later? There's somebody asked me to do something. I gotta check my phone. Oh, I'm thinking. Okay, back. I'm breathing out. Why? Why did that? And I could give all these examples, but it's always something. Somebody said something to you, or some childhood thing pops up, or some trauma comes to you, or discomfort, or so anyways, it's if you're there for 5 minutes, you're gonna probably 500 times you're gonna just be going back here. But the value of that is that as you go through your life, um throughout your day, you notice when you start having anxious feelings comes up, you can start using that tool of like, no, we're not doing that right now. We're focusing on this. And it simultaneously is helping you train your patience with yourself, because it is a
gentle redirection is what it's
gentle redirection.
Hmm.
Because you're engaging in this thing that is essentially kind of impossible, which is to cease all thoughts. And yet you have to stay calm. You have to practice, and that develops resiliency within you. So you'd asked about love and self-love, and yeah, this can be a really hard one for a lot of reasons for a lot of people, even non-XJWs. And I guess a couple of things I would say. So jumping off of meditation, that is one of the things that you can use as the object of your focus. You may sit with the focus of developing the feeling of love within you. If you have a hard time directing that to yourself, you think of somebody that you love, or a pet that you have, that when you see them, you're like, oh, like my dogs, I love my dogs. Oh, my dogs. You feel that like swelly kind of feeling. And then once you have that feeling, that the task is, how do I just rest in that feeling? Not think about it, not analyze it, not see if I, not try to manipulate it. Just, what is that feeling? How do I just stay there? And then once you get a handle on that, then yeah, it'd be good to steer that towards yourself. How do I see myself and recognize I didn't get that love that I craved from the people around me? How do I aim that at myself? And then I'll just quickly address, it gets complicated, because that what you're really talking about there too is, when you aim it at yourself, is you're aiming it at your inner child who has been neglected, not only by the people around you, but by you, because you've been mean to it and hard on it, and beating it up, and calling yourself stupid and saying you're terrible and all these things. So the little inner child doesn't immediately go, oh, thank you for all the love. There's sometimes resistance, and it's not sure. So we don't have enough time to go into it, but there's that whole piece of it too, which is patience, faking it till you make it, if you want to call it that. But yes, keep being persistent in directing that love to yourself, and things will shift gradually. And that little inner child who's kind of been locked in a cage will start peeking its head out.
Oh, I love that, because you're taught so much to just love other people to the point of self-abandonment. And if you can just kind of redirect some of that love, just a little bit, if that's all you can handle right now, if you are the people-pleasing type, like many of us were recovering from. Ryan, you get into people-pleasing. I see it up there on the list, but just kind of redirect that back. I love that you did that self-love meditation. It's something I will love forever. And thank you so much for bringing that. I hope that for those of you who are listening to this, whether on the podcast or visually, I really hope that did something for you while you're listening to this.
Yeah, so a few other things that are pretty common with almost everybody I work with. We'll just put a big umbrella over general anxiety and depression. And what to say about that? So a couple things. One is that, I want to note, there's this thing as a witness, you always hear that when people leave, the witnesses, that they're so unhappy and their life is a mess, and they throw in other stuff in there. You're gonna be a prostitute, you're gonna be hooked on drugs, whatever.
Orgies, debauchery.
Yeah. It's way over the top. But the thing is, they're right for the wrong reasons. Their reasons are, you leave because you're leaving Jehovah, and that's what you get. That's not the reason. The reason is because you're separated from your community and your family, and you have this whole new life to start, and you have to figure out that, oh, I guess Armageddon isn't coming, so there's a future and I have to do something about it, and I haven't gone to college, and like there's all of these very legitimate reasons for you to feel anxious, and depressed, and then we'll throw on top of that, like we talked about this a little earlier, that you're all of a sudden having to face all these existential anxieties that religion provided a shield for, meaning death, and what am I doing here? What is my purpose? So what I can say about this is one is it's normal and to be expected. I know that's probably not what people want to hear. They want to hear, well, how do I just not feel anxiety and depressed? But it's natural, it's normal, it is a human healthy response to a really rough situation. And I will also say that yes, with doing work, and there's a lot of different ways of doing that work, that shifts and it lifts and it lightens, and it may hang with you for a little bit, and that sucks. And trust me, as somebody myself, throughout my life, I've suffered with depressive episodes. It's the worst. It really is. It's a bad place to be. It makes everything hard. But I just want to, for now anyways, just leave it at it's normal. It's not a sign that there's something wrong with you or that you're broken. It's a sign that you've been through something really, really hard. Just like if you haven't slept for one night, the fact that you're tired is not a sign that you're weak or that there's something wrong with you. It's the fact that you need sleep and you haven't got sleep. So just really understanding that, that's part of it.
And it reminds me of that scripture that I know you newly waking up JWs are going to think about when it says, why be anxious? The day's anxieties are sufficient for today. And so Ryan, when we do have anxiety that's increasing, the Watchtower articles, they're constantly regurgitated to us that, anxiety is normal, but also it tells us not to be. So it's very contradicting. Like I like sinning is normal, but don't sin. But also like anxiety is normal. Anxieties of life are normal, but don't be too anxious. Jesus told us not to be, therefore it's bad for you to be anxious. It's labeled.
Yeah.
So when this anxiety comes up, what is one way that someone can counteract the indoctrination?
Yeah. So this is where it gets tricky because it's so unique and different for each person. So let's just right off the bat separate. There sometimes is a biological basis for depression and anxiety. Meaning, and to contrast that with sometimes there's anxiety because there's things that need to be taken care of or things that need to be addressed. So one of the first things is trying to get a sense of that. And usually when I talk to people, I can get a really good sense. People that have more of a biological predisposition, it's more something that they've carried with them even before leaving the witnesses, that kind of thing. It is worth in those cases considering the possibility of medication. But taking it into the realm of like, this is actually just a legitimate response to a rough situation. I'll throw a few things at the wall. It's a lot of different things, but number one, be kind, be patient with yourself. And what that means sometimes is accepting, yeah, I'm anxious today. Yeah, I'm really depressed today and I'm not going to get a lot done, and that's okay. Being soft with yourself, not sort of saying, I need to not feel this way. You're feeling this way for a reason. So allow that to be the case. Identify the aspects of whatever this anxiety is, or depression is, that are within your control. If you're feeling depressed because you're isolated, that's motivation for taking some steps to make connections. If you're feeling anxiety because you're delaying doing things that you need to do to take care of yourself or to take care of your life, find ways to address those. Now, again, it gets complicated because it's not so simple as, well, just do the thing. Often there's grieving needs to happen. Therapy helps with this. Often there's development of self-discipline. I know for me, when I went through this past year, I went through a pretty rough depressive episode, and I couldn't really find it in me to do much of anything. And I started off by making commitments to myself. So one of the things that I live in Peru, my Spanish still isn't great. I said, I'm going to use my Duolingo, my Spanish training app. I'm going to do that once a day. And it started off with, I'm just going to do one lesson, takes 2 minutes once a day, but I am going to do that every day.
Wow.
And little by little, and it took a period of months, but that one lesson came 2 lessons. That 5 minutes became 10 minutes. And again, the key part of it was, no matter what, I'm doing this thing, no matter how I feel, whether I feel like doing it. Now cut to maybe 5 or 6 months later, that snowballed into so many different other things. I started playing piano. I started doing voice acting. I've
Really?
been, yeah, and I've been applying this same mentality is, okay, I'm going to add one thing, and that one thing is going to be something I do every day, no matter what. For piano, sometimes that means I'm going to sit down for 2 minutes and touch it and play it for a little bit. And that's fine. That's all I can do that day. But there's something in that sort of following through, keeping commitments to yourself. But again, I don't want to oversimplify it, because yes, therapy sometimes what's needed is to push harder. Sometimes what's needed is to push less. And that's very unique to each person in their situation.
And I do want to talk about the amazing effects that you mentioned, the way that we talk to ourselves. And there is a measure of healing that comes from therapy, in the sense that when we say it out loud, when we tell our stories, when we talk about what happened, it's reaffirming to ourselves that, yeah, you know what, this happened. And it can kind of, our internal dialogue changes. I know for me, one of the things that therapy helped me to appreciate was that my internal dialogue was not actually mine. My internal dialogue was a bunch of people. It was the organization, it was my mother, it was anything and everyone but mine. And the way that I spoke to myself was so mean. And that is what kind of would spiral me into anxiety. It was like, why am I was just this ball of tension, all because my internal critic was a lot louder than my internal voice. And so, one of the tangible practices that I really appreciated from your help was trying to reframe my internal dialogue and finding my own voice, which is a huge undertaking. It's I don't want to oversimplify reframing your entire inner dialogue, but there is a measure of that when it comes to anxiety and depression. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we have this that you touched on. What's part of the trick is that recognizing we have a lot of voices in our head.
Mm.
And yes, most of those voices, particularly the negative ones, are actually absorbed from other people and parent figures, authority figures, that we've internalized. And the trick is recognizing which one we're feeding.
Mm.
Or another way to think about it, I use the analogy of like a boardroom. You have a boardroom of voices in your head, and one of those voices is going to be the one that's going to be cautious, overly cautious, but in slightly fearful. Better watch out for that. Better watch out for this. Don't push
Right.
don't extend yourself. Don't make yourself vulnerable. Very annoying when it's out of control, but also has a place, because what it's trying to do is protect you, even though it doesn't feel that way. Another one that's just going to sort of interpret everything you do as, well, it's hopeless, and whatever, the Eeyore, if you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but here's the thing: is when the problem isn't we need to get those people off the board. The problem is we have an imbalance in the board. We're not hearing enough from the voice that says, "Hey, you're working really hard. Go easy on yourself," or you know what? Hey, buddy, you missed this one, but look at all the ones you did get, and you'll get them next time. That voice, we have that voice in there, but it's buried under all these other voices, and we're giving a lot of attention to the ones that are like warning us and criticizing us. So in this boardroom, somewhere in there's also the head of the board. I don't know if you call it the CEO,
Mm-hmm.
but the CEO who decides who gets airtime, who gets to hold everyone's attention. So what we need to develop is that ability to be able to go, okay, anxiety, or okay, critical voice, thank you for what you're offering. but I want to hear more from the encouraging voice.
Mm.
Um, and again, it's not like you just try this once and the critical voice is going to be like, oh, okay, no problem.
Right,
I'll just sit back.
right,
No, because they've run the show for so long, you're going to keep going. But the task, and this is again where meditation can be helpful,
right.
is to say, okay, you can yap all you want, but I'm not going to give you my full attention. I'm going to keep developing that. Another idea I use too is this when you're talking about how you talk to yourself, access the voice of the idealized father or mother you need. If you don't know somebody like that, pull somebody from fiction, TV. I know for anybody who's watched This Is Us, there's this dad on there.
Yes. Oh my
You've
God.
seen that?
Yes.
He's just the best dad. And he's
Yes.
just so loving and caring and says the right thing all the time. And Jack. And like to me, that's like a perfect example of like what would Jack say in this situation? And listen to Jack and give Jack airtime because we all have that. We all somewhere in us, so access that.
You know why this is so hard, especially for XJWs, is because you're taught nothing but external sources of validation, not internal. So it's a very foreign concept to listen to your own voice when you don't even know what it sounds like.
No, no, you don't. And it takes a little time.
Mm.
But the trick with that is when you're coming out of the religion, especially, is trust, for what it's worth. Trust me, it's there. Your voice is there. It is just buried upon layers and layers of all of this other stuff, but it is there. So the way to coax it out is start paying attention to how you're feeling. Start paying attention on the way certain experiences make you feel, and keep an eye out for anything that lights you up even a little bit. Anything that like puts even like a tiny spark in you, nurture that. If that pops up on your radar, if something you try, you're like, oh, that's kind of put more time into that. That's your true self speaking up. And your true self is also anger. Anger about certain things. It expresses a lot of different ways, but it's your authentic primal self is there, and it just needs help kind of breaking through the surface.
So would you say our internal wisdom is just inherently part of us? We just have
I
to,
believe so. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
That's,
I mean, I'll just add on to that. So
yeah.
like, I do believe it's inherently part of us. And another thing that comes up a lot is maybe we'll talk about in a second that people don't trust themselves.
Mm, true.
Um, they Jehovah's Witnesses do not trust themselves and they do not trust the world. So it makes them primed to depend on people who are asserting themselves in a position of authority, but they're told, do not trust your treacherous heart. That
Trusting in your heart is stupid.
Yeah, yeah, you're told to your face that you're a sheep. You know what I mean? And on and on and on, all of these different ways. But so they walk away with this impression. I don't know how to trust myself. But here's the thing: almost everyone I work with, you absolutely do. That doesn't mean that sometimes your instincts will lead you into some situation you wish you hadn't gotten into, but those situations will further hone and help develop your instincts. You have them. Again, the problem is you have too many other voices and self doubts and self criticisms that are drowning out your authentic. Like, I like this. I don't like this.
Wow.
That's what's at the core. And when you tune into that, I like this. I don't like that. And let that be okay and not overanalyze it. That's your source.
It's the overanalysis, I think, that is very part and parcel of the XJW. I've noticed that it's so significant of, okay, but what does this mean? What does this mean? What does that mean? What does that mean about me? What does that mean for my future? And then you just get really, really out of control with the overanalysis. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and if you don't mind, I'll just add
No,
one
no,
more thing.
good. I'm just
You
reading.
keep making me think of things, but
We
the
always do this.
over-analysis, this is something I've noticed recently, but it is pretty pervasive, is there's this thing where I see people will have this instinct. They'll be like, I feel this way. But then there'll be this, but why do I feel that way? Is it because of selfish reasons? Or maybe, where is that coming from? What is my motivation there? Is this a pure motivation? You know what I mean? There's all these kind of second guessing because there's this idea that, that nothing is worth doing unless it is totally 100% coming from a holy saint-like place. And the problem with that is that's really rarely the case. When we do something, we have lots of different reasons for doing something. When I do something nice for my partner, is it because I love my partner and want to express my love and I like seeing her happy? Absolutely. Is it also because I want to maintain this relationship, and if I don't do these things, then I may lose this relationship? Yep, that's there too. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many examples of this, that there's light and shadow sides of everything. And it's okay to just let your first instinct, your first impression be the one.
And there's a difference between thinking of yourself less and thinking less of yourself. And as a JW, they're synonymous.
Yes. Yes, they are both valued very highly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, the closer you are to poverty, the more Christ-like you are.
The more you're applauded.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
just
exactly. Yeah.
creates a bunch of martyrs.
The less you do for yourself, the more you're actually doing. It's terrible.
It's such a horrible
Like,
message. And that's one of the reasons why, like, in those kind of things, I go, most of the people I work with, I go a little bit the other way with. So I'm not going to say you should be a selfish person and only put your needs first all the time in every situation. No, I'm not saying that. But for ex-witnesses, for a while, that probably should be a good way to approach things for a little bit, because we need to counterbalance. We're so far over here with be selfless. Don't think of yourself. Don't ever put yourself first. Just always kind of, if anyone gives you a compliment, you better sort of be self-deprecating, and all of this stuff. It's gross. It's too much that way. You need to take care of yourself.
a
You need to
lifelong
think about your
project for
needs.
me was just saying thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just saying thank you. If somebody recognized something in my children, or, you decorate your house so lovely. Oh, but this is old and no, it was just thank you. Because
Yeah.
you're taught that if you say thank you, that means you're agreeing that there's some sort of narcissism there, or there's some sort of ego.
How dare you
Oh,
think
yeah. How dare
something
you?
good about yourself?
This right spirals into, I didn't mean to say the word spiral. What's the word?
Segues.
Segue. Yes, good. This segues us into people pleasing, overgiving, and excessive worry. Something that is very part and parcel as well.
Yeah. Yeah, this is exhausting.
Oh,
And it's such a huge part. Again, almost everybody I work with that has this thing. And for a lot of the reasons we already touched on, we're groomed to seek external validation. Our connections are based on performance, how we're presenting to ourselves. We're told ideas like "do not stumble your brother," implying that that the choices of other people are your responsibility. And there's just always this hyper fixation on what are people going to think about what I'm doing. And just looping in what you just said about thinking too much of yourself, or or the value of just being selfless, which sounds like it should be a good thing, but it's not. It results in us giving more than we should, because we feel like if we just give a little more, maybe we'll get some love. We don't set boundaries. We don't say no when we need to say that. And what ends up happening with a lot of people who are like this, you will attract parasites. You overgive, you will attract people who overtake. and whose the relationship is based on you continuing to overgive. And if you shift at all, you may lose those friendships. You know what I mean? It can be
Yeah.
this self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing. And
Because the boundaries keep the good in, right? It's not the same as a wall built up, but when we're not taught boundaries, it's just anyone and everyone can have unlimited access. I was taught
yeah,
that no matter what, you're going to go to the elders and you're going to ask for support. No matter what decision you have to make on your own, you're going to not be able to make that decision on your own ever.
that's
Yeah.
right. And not everyone will take advantage of that, but there will be some people who take advantage of that.
Mm.
Um, and so one of my teachers, shared with me, it's a very simple idea, but he said, if somebody asks you to do something or ask something of you, you don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to give them a long-winded answer. Oh, I would do it, but here's why, and here's everything. You can just say, I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling it. That's it. And that is a totally acceptable answer. And anybody who that's not an acceptable answer for is not somebody you want in your life. It's okay to not even know. I don't know why I don't want to go to the party, but I just intuitively do not want to go. And that is okay, and just taking that and extrapolating it to so many situations. Don't worry yourself about why is it that you don't want to go, or why is it you want to go, whatever it is. It's
Or
fine
so
to
and so
just
is going to be there, and so can benefit from your association because it's just, oh my God,
oh
I remember that so
yeah,
much.
yeah.
I like the part that you said words dress opinions. Can you speak to what you mean by that?
Oh, that's kind of a typo. I meant
Oh,
that we're always it's seeking external validations about our words, about our
oh,
how we dress, and about our
oh! I
opinions.
thought, oh, that's profound. What does that mean?
Interesting. I might have to play with that.
We could. I
Words
think we
dress
could.
opinions.
Yeah. All
Since
right.
you mentioned, though, I will say words are important. And I have a little nitpicky thing when I start seeing people, they'll keep referring to the truth. Oh,
Oh,
when I was in the truth, words matter. Words do mean things, and they affect how you see the world. And somebody co-opting the word truth,
mm.
that's a significant thing. Again, if you think they are the truth, then please go back. But if you don't, then stop calling them the truth. It is not the truth,
Well, even saying the truth indicates that there's no other truth
Right.
or that everything
The
else is false.
Sure. Yeah.
That is the
Yep.
hallmark of culty thinking, right? We've talked
Absolutely.
about the Bright model extensively. And so if I were to say to you, that is the truth, and I am this influential person, and you are going to believe me, well, yeah, of course you're going to think that's the absolute truth. But
Yeah.
if you call it the religion, it takes on a whole new meaning.
Yeah. I prefer the cult.
Oh yeah. For a newly awakening XJW, that is a really triggering word. I think the word cult, when I first woke up, I thought of men in cloaks and eating live chicken and
Drinking
sacrificing.
Kool-Aid and
Yeah,
shaving heads.
sacrificing babies, that kind of thing.
No, and I should be careful about how easily I throw that on. That's one of the first questions I ask people when I meet them, because it gives me a sense of where they're at with that. And for what it's worth, I use that word because if you really just break down the definition, you mentioned the bite model, which is,
Mhm,
a way of understanding what is a cult.
mhm,
They fit the description, and I find that useful because as a starting point, like we talked about earlier, for recognizing this is something that's problematic, um, and causes harm to people, and that lays the groundwork for the ways that it affected me. I need to keep a keen eye to that, and recognize this is not an extension of the truth. This is the product and effect of
mhm.
cult mentality and cult behavior.
And one more thing that before we conclude this part of the interview, one of the things that you really did help me deeply appreciate is what grief actually is and how someone is grieving the loss and what it feels like. Can you speak to the new person, your first client, who doesn't really know how to put a word with that emotion and what grief actually is?
Hmm.
Hmm. It's actually a death.
Yeah. Grief is a hard one. I think like most people, it's more fun to play in the areas of like things that feel like I can do something about it, or I can read a book about it, or I can,
Okay.
there's some kind of pliability, and just about everything we've talked about tonight falls in that category. These are all things that we can grow out of, evolve, adapt, feel better, get to a point where they don't even bother us anymore. Um, Grief is different. And grief, such as the grief of being shunned by your family, is amorphous. It is pain that needs to be felt. And it is usually pain that needs to be felt for an indeterminate amount of time. It is something we can't avoid. It is something that creates more problems when we avoid. It is often, particularly in situations where a person's family is never really going to speak to them again, is often about accepting that to some degree, even though that pain may lessen or shift or not be as prominent or come up as often, it'll be something you carry. You know, you're never, if your family doesn't talk to you, there's never going to be a point when you think about your family and you won't at least feel a little sad that that's how it is. And here's the thing is it's hard because yeah, it's not like, oh, well, here, do these 10 steps this weekend and then you'll be over it.
Right.
Um, and it's not sexy. You know, it's not, but it is necessary. And necessary means making space to feel that. And that means, yes, therapy. Yes, sometimes you take an afternoon and you cry. And you feel those feelings. And through that process, you do feel better. You do get stronger. It's a combination. You feel better. It reduces that kind of thing. But you also get stronger in terms of you grow in your capacity to tolerate difficult feelings. So it is rewarding when you do it. It's just not so linear. And yeah, grief can be, like I said, be the form of family that won't speak to you, loss of community, loss of hope for paradise, grieving lost time that you can't get back. It can take a lot of forms, but it is the pain that comes from being human, and that comes from loss of things that matter to us.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful description of grief. And I think we can all relate to that. One of the things that I have found to be profound, and since we were just talking about grief, is feeling behind. Now, for example, I'm in my 40s. I was not allowed to go to college, was not allowed to pursue anything other than whatever would being a wife and a mother, and that's just being a woman. So can you speak to feeling behind in the world once you leave and normalizing that in our situation?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is connected with grief. We talked about grief a second ago. And the grief in this is accepting that there's validity to this feeling. Accepting that, yeah, that you haven't had a lot of you've missed out on a lot of experiences that are mostly common for most other people. And it's unfair. And again, we talked about earlier about anger. This reasonable to feel angry about that. And so it's important not to gloss over it and recognize like that needs to be felt. That pain, the pain of that needs to be felt and honored and validated. I'll also say that it is really important to give it the space it needs, but be mindful not to stay there. Because here's what can come along with that is there's these false ideas that come along with this. So one is everybody else has it together and I'm behind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Please, as a therapist who also has worked extensively with people that are not parts of high control religions, most of us do not have it together. We all play this game where we project that we have it all together because that's what we do. People ask, how are you doing? And we don't actually say, I'm really having a hard time. They go, oh, I'm fine.
Right.
Fine. we all play this game where we project and on our Facebook and everything, Instagram and all that. I'm sounding like an old man. Like on the Instagrams,
the,
um,
the interwebs.
the interwebs. But no, we're all broadcasting. Look how great I'm doing. Nope, wrong. Most people not doing awesome. It's a mix for all people. But anyways, don't get hung up on this idea that everyone is so far ahead of you and therefore has a lock on happiness and success or whatever. That's inaccurate. There's this idea that saying that we're behind implies that life is some kind of race where there's an end point and we're behind. We need to catch up in order to what? You know what I mean? For everybody, life is we're here and then we're not here. And we start off at point A and we end up in point B. And hopefully, if we're applying ourselves and we're engaging and trying things, we don't look the same at point B as we are at point A. Everybody has their own set of challenges. So don't make the mistake of thinking that, this is like a death sentence if you're a witness. Connected with that too is this idea that, people will feel this and they'll often lead to, it's too late for me. I'm 40 years old and I didn't go to college. It's too late for me. Pardon my language, but fuck that. Not only is that not true, but that thinking will inevitably create a situation where when you're 80, you will be feeling exactly the same way that you wished you didn't have wasted all of that time. So again, not glossing over the feeling of it, honoring it, expressing it, working through it. It's not as easy as just get over it. No, I'm not saying that. But don't lose sight of, yes, the goal is, what do we do with the time we have now? We can't do anything about where we came from. We can do a lot of things about where we are right now.
Mindfulness too. Like, what is in our control? What is in our control right now? It's this time on this date, and that's all I know to be real. That's the past isn't real. The future isn't real. This is real right now. Yeah. This is real. Ryan, this has been such an awesome conversation. Thank you so much. But we're not done yet. Now that we've covered a large majority of the things that you, as a viewer, having just left the religion, most likely are dealing with, we're also going to get into tasks. And now we're going to get into the how and things you can actually do right this very minute to make yourself feel a little bit better about waking up. And Ryan is going to give us his time and his effort. And he did put a lot of work into this. So that'll be in the next episode. So Ryan, thank you so much for being here. We really, really value your opinion in this.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And I can't wait to see you again.
Thank you so much for being part of this episode. And if you want to make an appointment with Dr. Lee, all of his information is in the description box. And thank you so much for liking, sharing, and subscribing this channel. And as always, we'll see you next time.